this agency should solve was a mess. We'll go around the board. Mayor?
Please
Your mics.
press the buttons on your mic so they're green.
Terry Wepler, representing Lake County.
Marty Oberman, City of Chicago.
Janelle Ford, City of Chicago. Leanne Redden, RTA, representing NPO Policy Committee.
Al Larson, Mayor Schaumburg, in Northwest Cook.
Carolyn Schofield, representing McHenry County.
Jerry Bennett, representing Southwest Cook.
Joe Zabos, CMAP staff.
Andrew Madigan, City of Chicago.
Matt Walls, West Cook County.
And on the phone,
Diane Williams, representing South Cook County.
anybody else?
Mayor Frank with ODTH, representing DuPage County.
And Matt Brawley, Mayor Montgomery, representing Kane and Kendall.
Rita? Not yet. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a quorum for the minutes of our previous meeting. I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions? Not all in favor, signify by a vote of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, vote of no.
Aye.
And the motion carries. And to remind everybody, we are live on YouTube. Under the first item on the agenda is Executive Director's Report, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The updates for the local technical assistance program are at your place. There's also a list of dates for the public comment period on draft plan, dates and locations. I'd like to welcome our new Deputy Director for Planning, Stephanie Pfeiffer. Stephanie, if you'd stand up so the board can recognize you. She started on Monday, so we're glad to have her on board.
From the great city of Aurora.
20 years. Yeah, 20 years with Aurora. We're hopeful that we'll be able to announce our Deputy Director for Policy and Programming by the end of this week. And certainly want to recognize all of the staff for the extra effort that everyone put in, both in the absence of two deputies at a time when we're already extraordinarily busy with plan preparation and everything else, but the team didn't miss a beat, and just want to recognize all of their work. Couple of items, just as information, I went out and met with the Will County Board, made a presentation to them back in April, a brief update on our work, as well as a conversation regarding our regionally significant projects, particularly those relative to Will, and participated in a full meet and greet with the board members. Jesse Elam was a part of that with me, so thank you to Jesse. Also was a part of a IDOT House Transportation Committee hearing on May 2nd in regards to transportation funding. And the gist of my remarks were that we need a truly modern funding approach for modern transportation system. That motor fuels tax is now rapidly becoming an antiquated approach in funding transportation. And so if we want to make sure that we are able to construct and maintain the transportation system that we need not only today but going into the future, we're going to have a much more modern approach on funding, and discussed our principles. Speaking of those principles, that will be a part of the discussion that we'll have in Springfield. Our legislative forum will be tomorrow morning, and so several of us are departing after this board meeting to head down to Springfield to have that legislative forum, give the legislators from the region the opportunity to get briefed and updated on to 2050 progress, as well as continuing our conversation on transportation funding. And then Gordon and I will do a series of one-on-one meetings with several key legislators. Also want to make you aware that I'll be out in DC next week speaking at Freight Conference for CAGIT. And while out there, we'll also be making visits to key congressional members and committee staffs of jurisdiction. So, Mr. Chairman, that is my report.
Thank you. Any questions of Joe? If not, on to the contracts and procurements. Angela? Rita, you on the phone?
I am on the phone.
Well, welcome. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Board. I'm bringing before you approval for 4 procurements. pavement data collection and pilot pavement management program for northeastern Illinois with a company by the name of DTS. A second procurement for a comprehensive plan for the village of Beecher with a company named Testa. Third, DuPage County Route 83 corridor land use plan with Tesca. And finally, audio, video, or AV services for Onto 2050 launch event with a company by the name of Sound Investment. So I'm seeking your approval for those 4 procurements today.
Are there questions on the procurement? Go ahead.
I actually just have a question. Can someone explain sort of the relationship of the payment data collection work vis-a-vis sort of the work that IDOT, the tollway, they do a lot of pavement data collection and analysis. How does all this fit together?
Yeah. Jesse,
Absolutely.
you want to take that one? We'll hand it to the expert.
So Leanne, this is actually something that we committed to doing as part of this STP agreement that was signed and approved by this board back in October. This is just for the local federal aid system. IDOT, for the most part, does not collect local jurisdiction roads. And so there's a gap in the state database that we're seeking to fill with this contract.
Okay, so it's kind of focused on work with the counties perhaps and local roads, and not specifically the state highway system and the.
That's
toll
correct.
road.
It's
Okay,
none of
I wanted to
yeah.
make sure that it wasn't doing double duty and sort of just, because it's $1 million. It's-
Yes,
Yeah.
we're very interested in making sure that we're not double collecting anything, so.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? If not, all in favor, did I have a motion? Is there a motion to approve? All the contracts moved, is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any final questions? If not, all those in favor signify by a vote of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, a vote of no,
Aye.
the motion carries. Angela, thank you.
Thank you.
Under the committee reports, there's a written summary of the working committees and the Council of Mayors Executive Committee before you. I don't know if there's any comments on this or
Just set the place.
for your information. Okay, getting into the core of today's meeting, and that's the draft 2019 budget and work plan. Angela, you're back up again.
Should have just stayed up.
I'm sorry, I thought we were waiting on committee reports, I'm sorry. I'll give you a quick overview, as this is the draft budget. The final budget will be presented at the May board meeting, so I'll give you some highlights of this budget. The 2019 budget reflects total revenues of $18.4 million, which is down about 12% from FY 2018, and total expenditures of $18.3 million, which is down 11% from FY 18. The reduction in both revenues and expenditures are the results of the completion of the Expressway Vision Project, which will be completed in FY 19, and just our general consulting costs have come down. A couple of the increases in the budget I'll highlight are in the personnel expenses. We've added to the budget for fiscal year 19, 2.5 positions. We've added an accountant under our finance division, a principal in the research and analysis division, and a licensed engineer to be in our transportation division. There is a 9% increase in commodities and 112% increase under our operating expenses, and those are primarily related to the launch of Onto 2050. There's a standard increase of about 6% that's related to occupancy expenses, so that's for our lease rents, our real estate taxes, our common area expenses, and our utilities. Those are pretty standard. Our primary revenue sources are similar to last year: funding from the Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transportation Administration, IDOT for our local match, which is about $3.3 million this year, Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, the Cook County CDBG grants, Chicago Community Trust, and local dues. Highlights for the FY19 budget includes the UWP budget, which is $22.4 million. It was approved by both the UWP and the Transportation Committee. It reflects $20 million and some change in core programming and $1.5 in competitive projects for all agencies, including CMAP. It's about $725,000 more than the FY18 budget. As I mentioned earlier, $1.2 million was awarded to competitive projects for CMAP in partnership with RTA, CDOT, CTA Metra. The competitive bucket was up about $357 from FY18. And this was made possible primarily because CMAP shifted some of its operating costs from the UWP funding source into our local dues bucket. So we were able to give that money back to the competitive bucket. In anticipation of a state budget and CMAP receiving its match from IDOT, local dues will remain the same, so they will be the same as FY17 and FY18. we're not proposing an increase in those rates for FY19, which would result in a credit of about $600,000 to our partners. And then finally, the good story, well, the budget's a good story in general, but this is a really good story, that we were able to give 5% operating increases to CDOT, CTA, Metro, PACE, and 6% to the Council of Mayors for the work that they will assume under the required STP reform. So this year, all the operating budgets received increases, and that's something that hasn't happened over, I want to say, the last 3 fiscal years. And so that's just kind of a highlight of the FY19 budgets, if you have questions.
I thank the group for considering the increase to the local councils. I know they very much appreciate that, and it's gonna go a long way in helping them do their work locally. Other questions?
Because I didn't hear you mention them, so I apologize I was trying to keep track of the ones I had questions on, but the association memberships, are we joining more, or is that fee increases?
So we put it in the budget, we're just paying for them out of local, so we might have increased a few,
Not our fees, like what we're paying to
Oh, I'm
associations.
sorry, yeah, so the local dues, they won't increase, those are the fees that we ask from our partners.
No,
That
I
would-
mean what we're paying into associations, so what associations we're joining, are we increasing memberships, like a CMAP?
I think we are, yes, and I can
So-
get you a list of who they are if you're interested.
I was just
Yeah,
curious if
yeah,
there's new
I'm
ones that we're
sorry.
adding, because it seemed like
Yeah.
it's significant. And then, and I don't, well, training would be another one. Is that for the new hires, or is there additional training that budget doubled?
No,
is
so
why
this
it's
year we
helped?
did something a little different. Our budget historically was based on historical, so what we did this year was a zero-based budget. We allowed the managers to actually from ground up create their own budgets. And so what they took into consideration was the training needs of their staff. So that's why in some areas you see an increase, because historically we were working off of historical numbers, which may not have been enough. But this year we allowed them to actually create real budgets based on need. And so when you do a zero base, when you go from historical to zero base, you see some categories tend to go up. And so that's why you see an increase there.
Yeah, so you won't necessarily get an apples to apples comparison from what was historically the line item. This was Stan's first year as our Director of Finance in doing a budget, and so we started from a blank slate on everything. And so it wasn't just a matter of kind of rolling over numbers and, making minor tweaks to it, but actually rebuilt the entire document from the ground up.
So what will happen is probably over the next 2 years, you'll really see how accurate, like, for example, the training numbers were. So this is a zero-based budget, basically. They started from the ground up. So that's why you see increases in certain buckets, but you also see decreases in other buckets as well.
And then the one I had a question on, and I don't know if it's appropriate for this, but the legal services, because that one seemed to significantly increase. I mean, is there something we're facing or anticipating with that, or is that?
We probably should talk about that during the executive committee.
Yeah, if you want an executive session, we can talk about it. Yeah.
Sorry.
Other questions or comments? Go ahead, Mike.
Just a couple of minor points. The salary increase, is that just the 2.5 new positions? Are there raises in there?
So yes, the salary increases include the 2.5 positions. It does include, on average, merit increases of 3% for eligible staff. We were able to offset those increases by reductions in our IMRF and our CSRS, which are our pension accounts. They went down. I think our IMRF actually went down 3%, and our CSRS went down 2%. So we were able to offset those increases with those savings on the pension part.
But we do have some increase.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think to your question, we don't do automatic increases. Nobody's entitled to an automatic increase. Everything's based on merit. And so we have an annual average that we use to estimate what the, historic, I would say, average is for those merit raises.
I was assuming that most, if not all of our people are meritorious and will get something raise. But maybe that's presumptuous on my part.
We have a high-performing staff.
I thought so. And I guess this was covered previously, by the way. We have made a final decision. We're not moving, right? So there's no moving expense, or is that not done yet, or?
We can have an executive session on real estate. We'll probably plan that for next month.
Okay, because we don't have anything in the budget. Okay.
Yeah, not contemplated in the budget, correct.
Not at this time.
I didn't want to ask anything that wasn't in the, I think that was really all. Oh, I know, there's a, what was the capital expenditure that we had that we don't have any longer, where we
So
required some
typically,
equipment?
that was for expenses, like, for example, to put the monitors in this room, we define it as a capital expense. So we're not making those sorts of investment in lieu of real estate conversations, but that would have been the
Got it.
funds to do expenses for significant investments in our location.
Okay, thank you.
Again, I remind the board, this is a draft. The official budget presented in May, we will vote in
June.
June.
June, this is May.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Frank, welcome. Have a seat. Okay, on to the item number 8, which is the communications material regarding the Auntie 2050. Tina, you're going to do that for us? This is the good stuff, right?
Right.
The websites and...
Hopefully. All right. Oh, this is not showing. Hi, my name's Tina Fassett-Smith. I'm the communications principal, and it's my pleasure to show you some visual assets and the web design for Auntie 2050. One of the first decisions that was made when we began to develop Auntie 2050 was that, unlike its predecessor, it would be an online plan versus a printed plan. And what that has allowed us to do over the past couple years, as the other staff has been developing the recommendations for the communication staff, is develop our technology and our in-house skills and some partnerships that will really transform the way that we communicate after the plan is launched as well. So one of the big differences between having a printed plan and an online plan is that we can make Auntie 2050 more accessible, more interactive, and more responsive. So what that means is that more people will be able to use it in different ways, using different devices, and if we do it right, it will prevent less obstacles for people with visual impairments or for physical impairments. So one of the first big challenges that we faced was thinking about how we would integrate Auntie 2050's content into the current CMAP website, which, as you all know, is full already of things. So what we decided to do was to create 2 channels instead of 2 websites for both the CMAP and the Auntie 2050 content. And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a moment when we go into the web design. We also spent this winter upgrading the website platform and stripping the content for the CMAP website down to its barest essentials. So what that meant was taking a lot of the Go-To 2040 content and kind of integrating it into the programs as they exist now, so that the website would be essentially clean when Auntie 2050 was launched. We also began planning a long time ago, probably 2 years ago, with real development starting about a year ago, for visual assets that would communicate the plan as best we could visually, and I'll show you a sample of those. So the visual assets we've been developing include photography, architectural renderings, and info and data graphics. So about a year ago, we partnered with a professional photographer, and we began to document strategic locations through all 7 counties over multiple seasons. We worked with the staff who were actually writing the plan to make sure the locations we were picking were just right to talk about the recommendations in the plan. We did this through ground and drone photography and captured a lot of video. And while we were doing that, we developed a library that staff could use to search and use these photos for materials that they might create after the plan is over. So this is just a sampling from across the counties of the photos that we now have. There are hundreds of them. And like I said, these are all searchable in a photo library that we can all use. So we also partnered with an urban design firm called Urban Lab to create renderings that would show how our interventions might look in specific locations across the region. And we wanted to do this so that people could see how they looked in real life settings and to see how change might happen to a neighborhood or to an area over time. So this is just a sample rendering that I'm showing. It's not complete, of a typical office park off the highway in the region. And this shows how incremental change might happen over 30 years to transform this area. When this is actually on the web, we can add interactivity that would allow people to learn more about the specific interventions via hotspot rollovers, which I'll show how they would work in just a second. And as we always do, our team has been busy developing and improving the infographics that we'll use to add clarity to the most complex data points in the plan. And there we'll add interactivity that savvy web users expect where it makes sense. So one of the things we expect to use a lot of to explain the really complex processes or strategies in the plan are schematic illustrations that just allow people to experience a complex process interactively via getting information via hotspots a little bit differently than they would through traditional text. Of course, we'll develop beautiful infographics as we always do, and to these we'll add interactivity where it makes sense. And as I mentioned, all of this is in a digital library that this just shows photography, but when the plan is done, this will include all of our visual assets that I've shown, and all staff will be able to use that from their desktop to pull into presentations as needed. So for the web design, what I'm going to show you is a chapter landing page, a recommendation page, the presentation of local strategy maps, profiles, and then the interactive glossary and endnotes for the plan. So this is a typical chapter landing page, and what I want to point out here is the CMAP and Onto 2050 logos at the top. This is how users will navigate between the two channels that I mentioned before. So if you're on the CMAP website, you'll see that Onto 2050 logo at the top, and that will always take you to the Onto 2050 landing page. If you're on the Onto 2050 page and you see the CMAP logo, that'll always take you to the site as we know it today. This is the current CMAP site. When you come to the Onto 2050 site, this top-hand navigation that's highlighted now will give users choices as to where they can enter the plan. And on the right-hand navigation, for this page, for example, you see the goals outlined, and I'll show you how that right-hand navigation changes depending on what page you're on. So the new design that we've developed allows us, first of all, for the first time, to use the full width of the screen to show off these beautiful assets that we've created. We'll use strategic use of pull-out quotes as a web best practice. Anytime a link opens, it'll open in a new tab, so readers can always use their place. We'll also add the ability for rollover definitions of acronyms and particularly wonky words that readers might encounter. This will link them to a glossary that I'll show you in just a moment. For the goals of each chapter, each recommendation will be highlighted visually with photos and located under its goal so the reader can make a better connection between the goals and recommendations. And at the end of the page, readers will have access to the endnotes and glossary. So here's a typical recommendation page. You see here that the right-hand navigation has now switched to the strategies for that recommendation so that they're always in front of the user and easy to access. This is an example of a really simple interactive chart that could be incorporated into the page. And this is an example of what we're referring to as an in-page ad. So what these are meant to do is highlight things that live on different pages but are related to the recommendation. So this will give readers more information about the recommendation that they're looking at, but we don't want to take them completely out of that experience of reading the recommendation by showing this. So this shows a local strategy map, and I'll show you what the pages that the local strategy maps live on in just a moment. So this is an example of the architectural rendering with rollover hotspots that show more about the interventions that we're trying to display. And finally, we took really great care in organizing the strategies and actions to take out any graphics here or any clutter so that they could be seen and scanned as easily and quickly as possible altogether. So as I mentioned, instead of adding a parenthetical with a definition, we wanted to make the glossary and the acronyms as easy for people as possible. So they'll have a rollover, or they'll have a link to a glossary. All of the plans, definitions, the glossary will all live in one place. It can be searched alphabetically or by keyword. Likewise, when readers encounter a footnote, there'll be a circle around it that will darken when they roll over it. That will indicate that they can click it, which will take them to an endnotes page where all of the plan's endnotes will live on one page, separated by topic. So you've heard a lot about layers as we've been developing Onto 2050. We recently renamed them local strategy maps because we felt that was a little bit easier for users to understand. They'll all be located in one place on the website, as well as scattered through their different recommendations that they're related to. This is where they'll be housed on one page. We wanted to make sure we're able to give users a little bit of context about them, about how they might use them, and then organize them by topic and searchable by keyword. We've spent a lot of time thinking about the best way to present the local strategy maps, and what we've developed is a really flexible page that has an interactive map with an interactive legend. When users make selections on that legend, it impacts what they see in the map and what they see below the map. Users can slide that legend over. This will be particularly useful for mobile users. Zoom into the map to get more detail, including rollover information. We've also added a feature where you see view 1, view 2, and view 3, view 4 here. We can add location-based case studies that might give more information about a strategy or an intervention that we're talking about, and those will be highlighted in the map and in the text below the map as well when they're selected. So we took a lot of time and care to add people to the plan wherever we could. We spent the past year interviewing 20 different residents, some of them very well known, some of them less well known. And their interviews are going to be scattered through the plan to add related recommendations, and they'll also be housed all in one place. And before I scroll through this, I just want to note some of the names and titles here might be wrong because this is just a for placement only design draft, but I'm sure you'll see some familiar faces here. And this is what the profile pages will look like when they're viewed individually. We were able to interview these folks and do studio photography. So we'll have an interview along with that photography. And at the bottom of the page, we'll be able to take people to the recommendations that are related to whatever that person might have been talking about in the interview. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how the draft and the final plan will be different. So the draft, when it comes out in June, will be online. It'll be organized much like you've seen today, but it will not include the graphics, aside from the photography or the interactivity that I've shown. That development that I've shown today won't be completed until June. And we actually think that this is a good thing for a couple of reasons. Number one, the level of polish that I've shown today, we feel like if we came out in June with that for the draft, people might feel like it was done, when in fact the plan is not done. And it's important that people understand that. And we also feel like we don't want to use all of our bells and whistles in June. We want to give people a reason to come back in October and see the plan then. When the plan comes out in October, it will, of course, include a long version of the printed plan. It will include a short printed plan, but we really feel like the website is the plan, and that's what we'll always promote and focus on primarily. So that is all I had. I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Questions? You're gonna love the dictionary, right?
I love the dictionary.
All right, thank you.
Actually, I do one question.
Yes.
When is this expected to go live?
Oh, on October 10th.
Okay.
Along with everything else.
Just a comment, really impressive.
I think it's outstanding.
Really,
Well,
people
thanks.
were, first of all, so beyond my comprehension. I'm easily impressed, but it really is.
We're very grateful for the partnerships that we've been able to have, the team that we have in communications. So I'm glad that you like it.
Oh, well done.
And just a reminder, I know Sherry's already working hard on getting the one-on-one visits set up with all of you and all of the MPO members. So starting in June, I'll be coming to do those one-on-one briefings and presentations on the draft and taking your input so we can continue to refine the document before adoption in October.
Certainly coming from the old plan and to where we are today, so along with technology changing as it has, I think going forward with the web design, not just for millennials, but I think it's going to be an easy 1, 2, 3 for non-tech people, including
Non-millennials, that's a euphemistic way of.
including glossaries and identifying terms and words that for the non-transportation people, for the non-planning people. Hopefully, it really will be a great tool to be used. We have obviously come a long way, and again, I thank staff too for what's going on here. And as we move up to the official announcement in October, we're all pretty excited about how this has all come to place over 18 months, a little bit longer, and for the staff for everything they've done in creating this in a different way than it was with the release of our last plan. So I gotta congratulate them. And again, for the board itself to be prepared, especially in June when you get the draft, and then certainly over the summer, the comment period, that we will be ready in September with a final add-ons or takeaways, and then for the October presentation, are we gonna make it as exciting as the last one, or?
More exciting. The launch event is really coming together, and it's still too early to give full details on it, but we anticipate it being every bit as big of a special event. And the irony is the date that we chose, Mr. Chairman, not only is your birthday, but our keynote speaker, it's his birthday.
Wow.
It's the birthday of the agency, and the individual that we're pursuing to moderate, we've got our fingers crossed. I won't share any names because it may or may not pan out, but it happens to be that individual's birthday. So
Lucky day.
there's going to be a lot to celebrate.
For those who were on the board back then, I mean, it was a huge event. It was actually phenomenal. We had it at Millennial Park.
It will be again.
We had Senator Durbin. We had many dignitaries, and just to see that crowd and the excitement to launch our plan and really this agency into the world was quite something to see. So I hope we can almost live up to those expectations.
I'm not sure if Mandy's in the room. She's probably, I've had her so busy on editing documents this morning, she's probably afraid to leave her desk. But Tom or Tina, what is the RSVP count up to now? I know we're anticipating 1,000 people again. Yeah, over 300 already, and October is several months off. So.
And I got to remind everybody too, from that event, the very next day, Senator Durbin was able to procure $3.5 million, which was huge to for the implementation of our LTA program and all the things that were done. So we need to give them a call ahead of time and maybe make a phone call that we can get $3.5 million the day.
So, Mr. Chairman, our goal this time is to make sure we begin implementing the afternoon of the event, not the day after.
And what about inflation for that 3.5?
That's right. Thanks, thank you. Great work. Moving along here, under the state legislative update, Gordon.
Good morning, everyone. There are two bills and one resolution in your packet that the staff is recommending your support for. And I'd just like to give you just a brief description of that, followed by a couple of other items that developed after the report was sent to you all. House Bill 4748 provides county governments with policy tools to manage stormwater and raise revenues for stormwater infrastructure. This bill mirrors language of two bills that you supported last year, and so we are suggesting that you continue supporting this initiative. That bill is sponsored by State Representative Michael Fortner and Senator Sue Resin. The next bill is a resolution, HJR 98, which is designed to implement I-55 managed lanes. You supported a previous resolution last year. The only difference between last year's and this year's gives that authority now to the tollway. Last year, the authority was for IDOT to advance that project. And I think in Go To 2040, we were indifferent on who was the sponsoring agency. And so as long as it gets done, we think we should be supportive of that initiative. The third bill is House Bill 3418, a new measure which promotes urban agriculture. It allows municipalities to create urban agricultural zones, offer tax incentives to businesses associated with qualified agricultural projects. And it also allows municipalities to authorize local utilities to offer wholesale and reduced rates to businesses in the agricultural zone. And so those are the two bills and the one resolution that I'm suggesting that you support. And so I'm going to ask for approval for that, and then I'll move on to my next comment.
Sure, is there a motion to approve that resolution?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions? If not, all in favor, signify by a vote of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, a vote of no, the motion carries.
Great, thank you. So there's a couple of initiatives that kind of popped out after the report was sent. They're not of much consequence, but they should be noted. Senate Bill 3134 by Senator McConaughey creates a flood control commission to study current flood control practices within the counties of DuPage, Kane, Lake, McHenry, and Will. So it encompasses a considerable amount of our region. And so we're not opposed to the initiative, but there is a line that requires or says CMAP shall provide information to the commission upon request. We don't think that's a problem, but we think that it is an opportunity for us to talk to the General Assembly and remind them about our funding limitations because of the transportation issue. And so we're gonna take that opportunity to do that when we're in Springfield.
In other words, this would be an unfunded mandate, is that what you're saying?
Exactly, but I dare not say that to the sponsor of the bill.
Especially since
I
we
will
do
hint
believe
at
it's
it.
work we should be doing,
No,
so
I
it's a,
understand.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the sponsor of the bill is a former mayor, so they should understand it.
It comes from an
Unfunded
agency
mandate.
that was mandated to spend $400 million by the Congress and not given any of it.
Right.
So it's a sensitive topic,
Correct.
even when everybody wanted to spend it.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be too intrusive, but I just want to remind them that it could.
Gordon, I'm totally not sure of what's going on here with the counties as far, they're looking for our agency to provide assistance in the planning of in regards to flooding? Is that?
So no, it's actually doing a study. It's only a study, looking at best practices and how to implement them throughout those counties that are included in that project.
You know, years ago, an initiative that we're certainly proud of as mayor is to go to the MWRD and finally get legislation passed to create them as a single agency in our area to provide flood, stormwater management, et cetera, et cetera. And it took a vote of the General Assembly to allow them to tax for that. And since then, millions of dollars have been poured into local areas in the floodway, in the watersheds, I should say. And it's done remarkable things.
Right.
Is there been a thought about going back to these counties and giving themselves the authorization to, because with anything else, it still takes money to implement
Correct.
flood relief or creating,
Right.
flood plans.
In one of the previous bills, I mean, it talks about providing the counties with tools to advance stormwater initiatives. And so there are different initiatives happening at the same time, but I think the will of the General Assembly is to provide the counties with the authority to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's different, obviously with the MWRD, they're a district itself, and I don't know how the county really operates at a county level.
Right.
That could be similar to the MWRD plan, because they're not necessarily involved in wastewater.
Right.
But from a flood relief, I'm sure the county has some agency that deals with that now. That I'm just saying down the road to try to provide the monies necessary to accomplish all the planning that's done.
Correct.
Other questions, Gordon?
I have one other initiative.
Sure, go ahead.
And that is Senate Joint Resolution 62, which creates a task force to establish long-term sustainable infrastructure funding to study, analyze, and present recommendations for the most viable and efficient infrastructure funding plan and to be utilized by the state of Illinois. So that is an initiative by State Senator Martin Sandoval. Initially, that legislation did not include transit or bike or ped. He has since amended it to include those initiatives. So I would say that we would be suggesting that you support it. But at the same time, the Illinois Department of Transportation just recently released its long-range transportation plan, which will do all these things. And so we think it's unnecessary. And so we're not suggesting that you take any action, but just making you aware that that's going on.
Questions or comments? Which allows me to, if I may, segue into just kind of open business about funding. Go ahead, Marty, I'm
Well, I
sorry.
have a question on this before you. So is Sandoval's resolution proposing funding to create, to support this task force work?
There's no description or
Just,
funding that's attached.
just
And it is a resolution, so it's kind of
It's just
non-binding, but it is very
rhetorical.
suggestive.
Yeah, okay.
Which gets me to segue
Sorry,
into
Judge.
funding though, Marty. This is really on the same topic. This board over many years in doing some great planning, we've always said from day one, when we first met as a group in organizing CMAP and what it was gonna do, but the most important part is how are you gonna implement it, and that takes money. There really does need to be a serious and upgraded conversation regarding funding of infrastructure in this state. We continue to fall behind year after year. Every report that's come out recently, and state after state and outside of Illinois have raised necessary revenue to provide and support infrastructure. I doubt very much, this being a political year, that it may happen this year, but something's got to be done and done soon. You know, certainly the RTA and their estimates of needs throughout this region. We all know from local roads, from the state of Illinois, obviously they got whacked with $300 million taken out of their budget last year. We are falling behind so much. And whether it takes, again, this agency to stand behind or support or lead for that money, means and ways of creating new revenue. It's gonna have to be done, whether we do it regionally here through the RTA, whether the state's able to do it with a capital plan and coming up with certainly revenues to support it. And you need revenues to support whatever plan you're gonna do. So I'm kind of throwing it open as an open topic and discussion that I think this board really needs to seriously get out in front of the whole funding needs in this region and certainly throughout the state. In consideration of the 2040 plan, when 4 of the 5 major capital plans that we supported were through the Illinois Tollway, which has been obviously a very successful plan and certainly supported by revenues. People took a hit a little bit, obviously with the tollway increases, but as we are saying now more and more and more, it's going to have to be a pay-as-you-go. And maybe, the future looking at the tollway may have to take over all the interstates in our metro region to provide the necessary funding to support certainly its existing conditions, but any possibility of future expansion of any roadways with the huge amount of dollars, that may be the way, that's going to go. But I just want to throw it open as an open discussion with the board members regarding it. Joe?
So, Mr. Chairman, a couple of comments. First off, we will, or should, have a report coming back to this body from the Revenue Subcommittee that was jointly established by you and Secretary Blankenhorn, and so we anticipate that report will come back to you in June. In addition, coming back to my testimony last week before the House Transportation Committee, for what it's worth, and again, it was sparsely attended, but staff certainly was there. For the first time, I actually felt like there was a fairly meaningful conversation, with those legislators in attendance in the Q&A about what it's going to take to advance a modern approach. The beginning of a realization that, MFT is an antiquated approach that simply isn't going to work on the long haul. And so the gist of my testimony was really 4 key principles. The fact that whatever we do has to be a genuine fix. Let's stop, thinking about Band-Aids, and the public is so tired of Band-Aids and tired of, the assembly coming back. So whatever we do has to be sustainable for the long term, which means it's going to need to be indexed to inflation to make sure that it increases with the cost of construction and operation of the system. And again, that MFT isn't going to be the long-term solution. Important first step, but not the long-term solution. Secondly, that it needs to be fair. And that means those that derive benefits from the system contribute accordingly to the operation and maintenance of the system. That there needs to be equity in there, that ability to pay and ensuring that we're not overly burdening the needy has to be a key component of this. And then the fourth one, that it has to be performance-based, which means, let's forget about modal silos. and let's talk about what are the projects that give the best return to the taxpayers, provide the best transportation value, and those are the ones, forget about modes, those are the ones that get invested in, and ensure that new funding is flexible enough not only to invest in what are the very best projects, but also the fact that over the long term, the modes are going to change, and we can't even sit here today and say for sure what transportation modes are going to look like 20, 30 years down the line. And so let's not handcuff ourselves today in what we do. So we presented those principles. That'll be a key part of, again, our briefing with the legislators tomorrow. And, we're trying to make sure that when we do this, it's done right.
Just a query, really, more than a comment, because I'm not as in touch with what's going on in the legislature as you are, undoubtedly. But even though, we're working on long-term solutions, and Randy has initiated this task force, is there merit to the idea of letting Sandoval make this his baby as well? Because there's nothing that breeds support if they come up with, they say, oh, we figured it out. It's just like trying to convince a jury to decide one way. It's always more effective if they think they came up with the solution. So this is such an overwhelming problem, and the need to build political support for it, which is really the problem, is so great. I wonder if it might not be beneficial to encourage Sandoval to say, yeah, come up with whatever solutions you can. There aren't necessarily, there are only so many ways to do this. Not like they're gonna, the worst part would be if they came up with a solution that we don't need any money, but that's unlikely. So I'm just raising the question without having the subtleties of what's going on in the legislature. Maybe we should encourage them to say, yes, you should recognize the problem. Get your colleagues on this task force to own it.
A comment on that, Senator Sandoval obviously has always been very supportive of the transportation needs. And as we've seen and indicated over the years since the agency was formed and the conversations we've had about funding, a couple things I think have changed and hopefully have changed, and that's the decision on funding priorities. We have pushed that. I think with our new Secretary of State coming from this agency, he has pushed that. So whether or not, there is a recognition of our political leaders throughout the state that, you get the best bang for your buck. You put the money where you need it. So are we done with the political divisions of metro areas versus non-metro areas? Are we done with the divvying up of money? Which I've been down to Springfield and see when they thought they were getting close to something, especially in the area of transit. We can't do that because, our downstate partners, are getting gypped of monies because they don't have a transit system. So we needed to get over that hump, and that takes leadership and somebody standing up and say, look, we only have X number of dollars. It's got to be invested in the right places. Have we overcome that? I'm not sure yet, because I've been down there in meetings and saw where even when we talked about the old 55-45 split, which we think is even less than what the 55-45. Are they over that? So there's so many political questions and considerations to be done with our leadership, in Springfield as to that part of it going forward. Let alone now, let's talk about the dollar part going forward. But as soon as the money's thrown out there, somebody wants their share.
Well, if you get a legislative task force that lists some of the downstate people to be on it, and they start to educate themselves, you're beginning to build the groundwork for folks to come to the reality that get to exactly where you're saying. That's all I was thinking. That's
that's my point too.
And they're going off on their own just because other studies are going on. I would.
Yeah, the more conversations that are happening, I think the better. And they, whether that bears fruit, I don't know. Because if it does, I think it tasks IDOT to do this study, but they're already doing a study or they already released it. But, on the House side of things, State Representative Marcus Evans has shown an interest in, just advancing this conversation. So he's had 2 hearings thus far, and he intends to have additional hearings throughout the state on the same issue. So, there are discussions taking place. There are a lot of, ideas and thoughts. And, our biggest thing is to get the principles that we support in front of those guys and in their hands, so that they know exactly what we think is paramount to advancing transportation funding in the region.
And we've also offered up the assistance of our staff, and there seems to be some interest in, they've seen some of our analysis and such, and so those conversations are continuing.
In a broader picture of what we need to do, and the more, when I got involved in this, and up until today, what a missed boat that took place years ago on truly creating a regional transportation authority. Everybody ended at the borders, Chicago, the suburbs. And obviously you look at these metropolitan areas where transit is just a huge player in moving people around. And we don't have it. We don't have it in this region. There should be transit running all the way out to Bolingbrook or some of the other isolated areas, and to probably attempt to do it today would almost be almost cost prohibitive. But we missed that boat, and I think going forward we need to think about that, ending the borders and really taking a look truly at an integrated regional transportation system. And when it gets down to funding, as Leanne said, eloquently talked about the needs in this region, that we may have to do it on our own. We may not have to hang around and wait for the General Assembly to do it. But certainly if we can come up with a revenue source and leverage that money, either through new state money or potential someday federal state money or federal money to match that, it could go such a long way. But again, those are the politics that are out of our control. But we need to have the plans ready or the ability to say, look, if we can raise X number of dollars or create, will you match or will you go forward with us on many programs from Create to just other general support funding for things like Metro and Pace. So it's the project isn't, or it hasn't gone away. The problem hasn't gone away, but we need to still, I think, again, be out in front of what needs to be done, and it's going to be revenue. And people, they did the lockbox last year. Whether or not that convinced enough people that it'll work, that money won't be taken from one category to the other, as part of convincing people to do it. But we've got to understand this is a success story, I feel, about the Illinois Tollway with what they've done with $12 billion and continue to do. It's a pay-as-you-go, and people have got to understand that if they want good roads, they want good transit, efficient transit, it takes some money to do that. And we can't keep hiding or kicking the can down the road because of an election coming up around the next, every other year is an election down in the General Assembly. It can't happen. There's got to be a plan. Sorry, I'm on the soapbox, but it's frustrating to understand the needs, to come out with another plan going forward to 2050 and still save what we said from day one. Right, Al? Show me the money. We can have the best plans in the world, but unless we have monies to implement them, they're going to sit on that shelf forever. And we've done, we think, as an agency, the best we can to support at least the planning aspect of it, all the way down to the locals as to what they need and how they can go about seeing their future. So, now I hate to say it, but we still have some time. Is there a possibility we can go into exec session today?
Sure.
To answer those kind of questions
Yeah,
the
you
board
can
doesn't
always
mind
call.
that?
Yep.
I think we have a little time to get that over with.
You're always able to call for an executive session, so.
Is there any comments from the public? I will then entertain a motion that the board go into exec session to discuss some legal considerations and some real estate considerations. And we will come back and adjourn the initial meeting officially. So I'll entertain a motion that we go into exec session. Moved and second, all in favor, signify by vote of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, vote of no, motion carries.
Aye.
Thank you.